Welcome back. Do men fantasize about their wedding day? We talk about it next on Wedding Secrets Live.
Do men fantasize about getting married on their, or their wedding day? And how does all this work with men?
I'm gonna let you take this one.
Well, I can't speak for all men, obviously. I can only speak for, I guess, myself. But the answer to that question is yeah. Absolutely. I think there are definitely different stages of this and different levels depending on who the guy is, depending on the background. If it's a first marriage, then I think it's different than if it's a second marriage. Yeah, for sure. And definitely different if it's a third or fourth. I don't know if guys think in details necessarily, but I can tell you that from having worked in the wedding industry, the grooms are much worse than the brides. This idea of bridezilla is the most sexist term and completely ridiculous term that I've ever heard of. Because any occasion where you have a bride who's very active in wedding planning and a groom who's very active in wedding planning, in most cases, not all, before I get any mean comments, in most cases, though, the groom is way worse. Guys are far more dramatic than women. They are. They just are. I mean, just the way guys are, the way they react. I mean, they tend to be less mature about things. And when a guy gets heavily involved in the wedding planning, just look out because it is something else. But nevertheless, I guess speaking for myself, I don't think of it necessarily in details. Like, what's the dress that she's wearing or how does that dress look? Mm-hmm. I just imagine her coming down the aisle. You know what I mean? I imagine the first dance, dancing on the dance floor. I think about some things that, maybe that I want. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is it's maybe
you're
not
like,
so much
I
detail.
like chocolate cake.
Right, exactly. Chocolate cake, or if you want to have or if you're really into music and you want to have a simple orchestra or like a small combo, or
sure.
if you want to have a band, or if you want to have a DJ or things like that, depending on what your interests are. I was telling the story the other day that I did a wedding for another band where it was the fairly popular band. The drummer I did his wedding, and he was in charge of the music, right? So this is something he'd been thinking about a lot, when it comes down to his wedding day. I thought to myself, my God, I mean, what a the band was there, and I'm looking at the band on stage at this wedding. Yeah. And then I'm looking at the band that we're shooting this wedding for, the drummer, and the entire band's there. Lead singer is the best man. I mean, this is a
That's
a band
great.
that if I drop the name, most people would know. Long story short, I'm thinking to myself, how nervous would I be? Maybe the guy wasn't nervous at all, but not that intimidated, but just knowing that, you're on stage as a wedding band, playing for a world famous band. I mean, and this is something he was thinking about as a groom. And this is why I'm tying it into this whole thing, is that when he was thinking about music, that was something that he really thought about for the wedding. He was telling us that, he picked this band because the drummer led the band, and because he's a drummer, he kind of liked that whole thing. And so,
sure.
So that was important to him. For me, I don't think of it in details per se. For example, depending on when you're watching this podcast or this video. In a previous video, we talked about what's important at a wedding, what's not important at a wedding. I may have mentioned that centerpieces to me were something that wasn't that big of a deal. My counterpart who's in the other room heard that, and I heard about it. So I no longer think that centerpieces are not a big deal. They're a very big deal, okay?
We have a change of heart here.
So anyway, I got a little bit of trouble on that one.
That's funny. Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah, literally it was
now you find them to be very important.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was literally I think afterwards, I was recording the intros and outros for this, and I was in the middle of doing all that, she was like, you don't think wedding centerpieces are a big deal? I was like, yeah, I do. I do. I think they are. I just don't think in details. I just think of the day. But I do think of things in a very romantic, hopefully in a romantic way. I think of the first dance. I think about, just everybody being together. I think about, the opportunity to have everybody, once again in one room, and hopefully, sooner rather than later, with everything that's going on right now, we're, hopefully in a year at least, we'll get back to having, larger events. But it is, it's one of those events where it's a very special time. It's memorable. It means something.
I have guy friends, one in particular who she's definitely itching to get married. They're just not there yet. But he's like, I know who I'm going to stand next to, but I don't really care what we're wearing. Whatever color she wants is fine. Or I know I want I don't just want cake, I want other things. Personally, Alex can pick all of the music. I find a lot of pressure on playing DJ. I don't play DJ in the car. I don't play DJ at parties. I will run. So that's something that he's really good at. He might enjoy doing that. It's his job anyways, because I can't. But I do have guy friends that can think in broader, ideas of their wedding. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's the marriage, right? That you're there to celebrate. Right. Just keeping, that at heart. And centerpieces. Centerpieces are important.
Yeah, centerpieces are very important. So I think that also, it depends on where you're at. I mean, now, if you have somebody who's on their second marriage or possibly going into a second marriage, I mean, that may be different than somebody's going into it the first time too. And I think there's definitely something to be said about this as well, because, and we have clients who it is, their second marriage. One thing that you see on the second go around is this idea of what you didn't like the first go around. I mean, there's kind of that sort of like you look back at it and you go, that was kind of lame, or I felt like I was kind of pressured into that. I think of things more in that term. It's one of those things where I look at things going back and go, wow, I was really young and stupid and knew nothing at that time about anything. And, and I definitely wouldn't do this again. And I definitely wouldn't do that again, So I think there's that aspect of it, maybe for somebody who might be going into their second marriage. But yeah, do guys think about it? Absolutely. And some guys are very specific, as to what they want, and that's okay too.
Well, and I think a lot of brides would like some input.
How much input should a guy have?
To each their own. Yeah. I'm sure he can hear me. But I like input. If there's something that you feel strongly about, it's both partners' day at the end of the day. For either side, if there's something you don't feel strongly about, let it go. If it's something that you don't feel strongly about, but your partner does, embrace it. That's going to mean so much to them. Maybe I'm just not a fan of the chicken dance, and if it's Alex's favorite dance, we'll do it. You know what I mean? Don't get so caught up in the overall picture. If you know that your partner wants to be involved, just embrace it.
Yeah.
Because those might end up being the most fun parts of the night, because you were so focused, on these details that you may have missed out on, this one, and maybe your partner had that idea and it was great. Yeah,
absolutely. And I would just add to that, be open to ideas for sure. Doesn't mean you have to go along with all of them, but definitely be open to, what's important. Because even though something may seem unimportant to you, it doesn't mean that it's not important to her or to him necessarily. You know what I mean? And so it's, it's one of those things where, and maybe you just narrow down, maybe you make a list of, whatever, maybe separately you make a list of things that you really want to do, and you're going to come together, and one party might say, well, I don't really want that, and the other party might say, well, you know what, this is really important to me, and here's the reason why. Yeah. You know what I mean? And speak up, because you should. I mean, you shouldn't feel like, neither party should feel like they're getting bossed around by the other one. I mean, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's a matter of kind of just finding that delicate balance, Can you come together? Can you compromise on, on certain things? Want to walk away from the day, with any sort of resentment because, the other person was like, well, I don't want that, when you really wanted it. You know what I mean? And I think that's very important. Unless it's something really extreme. Because now that I'm saying this, I'm thinking about some real weird scenarios where it's
just ponies.
The clown
everywhere.
knows I want to wear it. Can I just wear the clown? I don't know, some stupid thing like that, right? It depends on what it is, but within reason.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, on either side.
It is a day where you're bringing together different kinds of families. You're bringing together different traditions. So sometimes there is kind of, by doing certain things, you're honoring your family, or creating moments that your grandparents will remember, and sharing traditions with your partner. So I love the idea of sitting down, making sure you have your list, and talking about it. It's hard to not get caught up with so much to do, if you're not hearing your partner, if your partner's not, expressing anything, you just don't know.
Exactly. And doing what you want to do too, not what family members necessarily want you to do. And this is where things get really tricky, especially if people are paying for weddings. You know what I mean? If you have outside parties paying, such as parents or, whomever helping out. and they want to throw their weight into the whole thing. And this is where things get stressful, I think, for a lot of people too. You're trying to please everyone. You're trying to please mom. You're trying to please dad. You're trying to please who, future mother-in-law, or whatever it may be, on both sides. It doesn't matter. And, and all of a sudden you're doing a bunch of stuff that you don't even really want to be doing. That's kind of ridiculous. And spending money in places that it doesn't even need to be spent, because it's not what you want to do. And you're wasting all this money on stuff that doesn't matter. It's important to kind of, play politics maybe a little bit with it, just kind of, maybe not get so hostile over it, but, keep things sort of. And at that point too, I mean, you could be in a situation as well where you got to watch, it's nice to have outside people help, but sometimes when people put money into stuff, they think that now they have ideas and, things that they can express and enforce and things like that. And I think it's pretty normal that happens in weddings,
sure.
One way or another. I don't think that's completely unusual because, parents, they want to have their best intentions for their kids. It may not even be anything out of like spite or malice. It could just be that, that they think that this is what should be done, but, the kids are sitting there going, no, this is what I want. And maybe 10 years down the road, you find out that your parents were right. Maybe you should have done that. But at the end of the day, it's still your wedding, and maybe you learn that lesson and say, well, maybe we should, but gosh, mom was right. Well, then mom was right, but that's still not what you wanted to do at that time.
And I think that, putting together the wedding, that's like your first project as a unit, right? So sit down, be on the same page. Right. Express how you're feeling because, things will come up later in life where you'll just be doing the same things, right? You need to be united. Yep. You need to have, equal voice. So it's good practice.
That's a really good point. That's an excellent point. I mean, it really is. It ends up being one of the first things that you're doing that's big, that's together, and whether you're buying a house or if you decide you want to have children or things like that. I mean, it's, this is going to continue on throughout your life. So you'll get a pretty good sense, during the wedding planning part, as to what the relationship, is going to look like, at least in the near term. It may change over time, but, you have a pretty good sense of the other,
Yeah.
I mean, pretty quickly. Don't mean to go too off topic, but we've recently had a wedding where, they called the whole thing off at the last minute. And she felt really, really bad, but they couldn't come together on the wedding planning side. They just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They couldn't get along. They found that they just couldn't. The whole thing was just a mess, and that both of them were like, you know what, this relationship just isn't for us. And maybe that happens too sometimes. I mean, that you just realize it then. And as sad as that is, I mean, it's not always bad. It's better to realize it then than go, 5 or 6 years down the road, and then all of a sudden go like, oh my God, neither one of us really. We can't come together on anything. You'll definitely learn a lot about each other, and about working through it. And then working through it, it builds it really binds the relationship as well. Mm-hmm. If you can work through it, to where it's something that you did together, that you pulled off. And that's the wonderful thing about it. I mean, weddings require everyday people, especially if they don't have planners and things like that. And in some cases, even if they do, and the planner's not doing everything, it requires, everyday people to all of a sudden become like event planners. So it's difficult, and I feel for people who are putting all of it together because it's a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, that can come along with it, natural stress and anxiety, which is why working with the right people is very, very important.
So what do you think? Leave a comment and let us know. Also, don't forget to subscribe, turn on those notifications, and smash that like button. I'll see you next time.